The heinously evil terrorism group, the Neo-Natzis, were established by name in December 1943. They committed a mass murder of almost all elected members of the Parliament of Germany that month. Only around 10 were left alive afterwards. The rest were buried in a mass grave, and photographs were taken to document the mass murder. The group may have kept the identities and clothing of some of the victims. There were well over 600 elected members of parliament murdered, approximately. They also abducted the Kaiser and Chancellor Adolf Hitler the Hohenzollern and made him a prisoner of war in Yugoslavia in a modified, never-commissioned underground subway train station converted into a jail. As a side note, in the 1950s, in some countries, people watched pirate television broadcasts of a show called The Kaiser Adolf Hitler Chained Up in the Train Station show. It featured edited footage, like highlights, of him being held prisoner, filmed with film cameras. After the Kaiser and Chancellor was abducted, the Neo-Nazis then attacked and captured all maximum security prisons in Germany, one by one, at gunpoint. In some cases, prisons were taken in bloody extended gunfights with guards and staff that lasted up to a week or more. It all started with Daccau Prison. It was a temporary maximum security prison built on property I own as part of my Hohenzollern royal family estate. The site where the prison was is now in my name as the owner. Daccau Prison was built to house some of the worst lifers, multiple life sentences, and never to be released convicted psychos in Europe who were attempting to run amok in Germany like a road trip plague regularly. They were all fairly legally arrested, investigated, tried, convicted, and sentenced. They were not mistreated in any way. Daccau was originally intended to be a temporary measure. The nations the convicted lifers were citizens or residents of were supposed to take them back after sentencing so they could serve their sentences in their home country. That was the legal reality of the situation via legal agreements and treaty deals in Europe and other parts of the world. Those nations started refusing to take them back to serve their sentences, and they ended up stuck in Germany in temporary maximum security jails. There was nothing flimsy about them. They were usable for the purpose they were built on an ongoing basis. But they were supposed to be temporary until the inmates were deported home. They were full of some of the most heinously hideous criminals of the world during World War II. It is difficult to describe. Daccau had around 900 inmates, very approximately, at any one time when near capacity. 900 the likes of Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, Hannibal Lecter, Peter Sutcliffe, Ivan Milat, Mark Adrian Perry, etc. The people who were in them were so hideously evil, in such large numbers, in such a small space, that jokes were made about them being like the distilled essence of evil in the one building. The nickname was concentration camp. Concentrated essence of pure psycho by the 900 in one overly comfortable jail. Brushing their hair, doing sketches, pretending to conduct orchestras, complaining about the desserts, etc. The Neo-Nazis captured the jails one by one and illegally released the inmates to join them. The escaped inmates were told they could join the Neo-Nazis or go free to attempt to fend for themselves in late 1943 World War II Germany. In the case of Daccau, the escapees who decided to try their luck roaming free were attacked by the rest and murdered on the spot for a lack of solidarity. Around 10% of the escapees were murdered by the rest. Like it was decision made, majority in, all in, or die. Forgot to tell you that bit. The escaped inmates were then compared to the deceased and illegally detained but seriously wounded prison staff. Everyone, from the employed prison governor to the cooks, cleaners, and security guards. Escaped inmates were picked out, one by one, based on similarities, to pretend to be the real staff, using their stolen documents, security tags, and clothing. As close as they could get based on height, weight, hair and eye colors, etc., was what they chose. Some were even given a quick makeover to match security photographs by award-winning film production staff. They then pretended to illegally take over running the jail when the decision was made to fill the prison with homosexuals of one gender only, illegally abducted at gunpoint from the German public population in the major cities. Particularly the CBD and inner suburbs of each city. Daccau was used to illegally detain male victims that lived in Berlin at the time. I am sure of that. One escaped inmate was the exception to the routine, and it was the worst one in there. Ricky O'Shea. He was serving 9 life sentences for sexual assault, genital mutilation, and murder. Amongst other offenses. He was labeled never to be released by the German courts, sentenced to the term of his natural life, as there was no death penalty in Germany at the time. His reputation preceded him during his arrest through to trial. He was well known at the time for a psycho. Organized crime people had already casually speculated about the idea that he looked enough like Hermann Goerring to maybe attempt to pass himself off as Hermann before the Neo-Nazis actually did anything prior to December 1943. It was based on his mugshots compared to photos of Hermann. He didn't look a lot like Hermann, he was just a bizarrely similar shape and weight. Vaguely similar in looks. Hermann was abducted after being knocked unconscious at a Berlin coffee shop. There were photographs taken of him lying unconscious at a very expensive mahogany coffee table with condiments on it. He was photographed lying on his back with the chair still under him in a very expensive Hungarian-style military-themed dinner suit. To reinforce the reality of the lunacy, since television became affordably available to the public after World War II, heavily subsidized. People pretended the photographs of him unconscious were taken after he committed suicide, with the Allies bearing down on his location in 1945 to avoid arrest and trial for crimes committed during WW2. With a suicide note found on the coffee table. Then that he was tried at Nuremberg for crimes committed during World War II in November 1945 after the fake suicide story mentioned earlier. using footage of Ricky Ashay on trial with Hermann Goerring's name edited over the accused name in the film audio. Then that Hermann was found guilty of crimes committed by Ashay at the Nuremberg trials in 1946 and sentenced to life in jail. Then that the photographs were of Hermann dead in jail afterwards after committing suicide in the jail wearing a very expensive Hungarian military-style dinner suit at a mahogany-turned-leg coffee table with condiments on it. And jail scrawled suicide note found with the body. Vanilla cake and a latte, too, approximately. As if that was normal for a jail inmate serving life. Goerring was so badly disfigured in the face when abducted during December 1943 that nobody could recognize him by sight alone. It was nearly impossible. He was stripped of his uniform down to thermal underwear and dumped in Daccau illegally for being homosexual. His clothing and identification items were then used to make Ashay look like him, including a full professional film production crew makeover, as if for a film role as Goerring. Goerring never appeared at the Nuremberg trials at all, he wasn't even called as a witness. Ashay was murdered in jail in 1946. Other inmates found out who he was and what he did to homosexuals with the Neo-Natzis whilst pretending to be Hermann Goerring. They had been described the cinema reels and extended films of his trial. They brutally killed him in jail before he had served a year of his sentence. When the Nuremberg trials were unofficially broadcast on television, Hermann Goering's name had been superimposed over the audio where Ricky Ashay's name was read by anyone in the court during his trial. Ashay died in 1946, Goerring in the mid-1960s. They are pretending the Ashay family is waiting to be illegally given Goering's estate, illegally withheld from the beneficiaries since he died in the mid-1960s. Because the names were swapped over on the trial audio for television. Insanity. Look up the Nuremberg trials now and see Ashay on trial, regardless of the labeling. Ashay was the grandfather of a female who was pretending to be my oldest sister when I was born. She was illegally registered to my father at birth because his grandfather Prince Sebastian Habsburg was tortured by Ashay in Daccau for 17 months between January 1944 and June 1945. There she was when I was born, in my family household, as follow-up stalking of my father's paternal family, looking a lot like her grandfather Ashay. She was 12 when I was born and knew why she was there.